I'm Claire, a financial analyst making $8,800 a month. A solid salary by most standards, but it didn't feel like mine to enjoy. Since I started working full-time, I've been giving my parents $4,400 monthly. It wasn't something I ever questioned. Supporting them felt like my duty as the eldest daughter. But my brother Aaron? He was always the star, 5 years younger, endlessly spoiled, and favored beyond reason. If Aaron so much as hinted at wanting something, our parents bent over backward to make it happen. Growing up, I watched as he received better gifts, more praise, and constant reassurance. I was the one who helped clean up after family parties, while Aaron basked in the compliments. I tried to ignore it. I focused on my studies, on my career. I kept my head down and did what was expected. But the favoritism never stopped. It only grew worse as we got older. And the turning point? That came 3 days before my wedding. 3 days before my wedding, I got the call that changed everything. I was sitting in my living room, scrolling through my phone, double-checking all the final details for the wedding. The venue was booked, the flowers were arranged, and the catering was confirmed. Everything was falling into place, and for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited about something that was just for me. Then my phone buzzed. Mom. I picked up without a second thought. Claire, she said without even a hello. I need you to cancel the wedding. I froze. What? It's Aaron's birthday that weekend, she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. We're planning a big party for him, and having your wedding on the same day will make things complicated. Just move it to next year. It's not a big deal. I blinked, stunned. Mom, I've been planning this for months. We've already paid for everything. The invitations have gone out. This is my wedding. She sighed, and I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. You're being selfish. You know how much Aaron needs us right now. What does his birthday have to do with my wedding? He's turning 28. It's not like he's a kid anymore. He's going through a lot, she snapped. And we want to make it special for him. It's your responsibility as his sister to understand that. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My responsibility? After everything I'd done for this family, all the sacrifices I'd made, and she had the audacity to call me selfish. Mom, no. I'm not canceling my wedding for Aaron's birthday. Her tone shifted instantly. Cold. Sharp. You'll regret this, Claire. You have 24 hours to cancel. If you don't, there will be consequences. I hung up, my hand shaking. When David got home that night, he immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? He asked, dropping his bag by the door and coming straight over to me. I burst into tears. She wants me to cancel the wedding. David's eyes went wide. What? For Aaron's birthday, I said bitterly. Apparently it's too much for them to celebrate both events in one weekend. David stared at me, speechless for a moment, before shaking his head. That's insane. You've been planning this for months. How can they expect you to cancel everything? Because it's Aaron, I said with a bitter laugh. It's always about Aaron. No matter what I do, I'll always be second to him. David pulled me into his arms. You don't deserve this. You've given them everything, Claire. You've supported them emotionally, financially, everything. And they can't even show up for you on your wedding day? I buried my face in his chest, tears of frustration burning my eyes. I just don't understand why they hate me so much. They don't hate you, David said softly, but they've taken advantage of you for too long. That night, I barely slept. My mind was racing, replaying my mom's words over and over. By morning, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to cancel my wedding. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. It was time to take back control of my life. I picked up my phone, took a deep breath, and called my mom back. When she answered, her tone was smug, as if she was expecting me to cave. I'm not canceling, I said firmly. The wedding is happening, and if you can't be there to support me, then don't come. There was a long silence. Then, in a voice dripping with disdain, she said, You're making a huge mistake, Claire. You're going to regret this. No, Mom, I replied. my voice steady. The only mistake I've made is putting everyone else's happiness before my own. That ends now. And with that, I hung up. The moment I hung up on my mom, my heart was pounding. I couldn't believe what I'd just done. I had stood my ground. For once, I wasn't the obedient daughter, the fixer, the peacemaker. I was just me, Claire, a woman finally choosing her own happiness. But as empowering as it felt, the fear crept in almost immediately. Did I do the right thing? Was I being too harsh? Would I regret this? I shook my head, trying to push those thoughts away. No, I couldn't go back to being that person, the one who bent over backward for people who never appreciated it. David walked into the room, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "I don't know," I admitted, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "I've never done that before. I've never stood up to her." David sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee. "You did the right thing. They've been controlling you for years. It's about time you took back your life." I nodded, sipping my coffee. I don't know if they'll ever forgive me." David's expression hardened. "Claire, they're the ones who need to ask for forgiveness, not you." The next couple of days were quiet. Too quiet. I didn't hear a word from my mom or dad. No angry texts, no guilt-tripping calls. It was like radio silence from the people who usually couldn't go more than a few hours without needing something from me. Honestly, it was unsettling. David and I kept busy finalizing the wedding details. We had scaled everything down, deciding to keep it small and intimate. I wasn't about to invite people who didn't support me or David, family or not. Instead of stressing over the guest list, we focused on what really mattered, the 2 of us. But just as I was starting to feel a bit of peace, my phone buzzed. It was my Aunt Lucy. "Claire," she said as soon as I answered, "what's going on? Your mom's been telling everyone that you canceled the wedding and broke up with David." I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course she has." Lucy's tone softened. "Is it true?" "No. David and I are still getting married this weekend. But Mom wanted me to cancel it for Aaron's birthday, and when I said no, things got ugly." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Lucy sighed. "I had a feeling it was something like that. You know how your mom is when it comes to Aaron." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I know." "Well," Lucy continued, "I just want you to know that I'll be there. Your Uncle Tom, too. We've always supported you, Claire. We're proud of you for standing up for yourself." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Proud of me. I couldn't remember the last time someone in my family said that. "Thank you, Lucy," I said, my voice cracking. "Don't thank me. You deserve to be happy. We'll see you at the wedding." Hearing that someone in my family actually cared felt like a weight off my chest, but that relief didn't last long. The next morning, my phone lit up with notifications, texts, missed calls, even a voicemail from my mom. I played the voicemail, my hands shaking. "Claire, it's your mother. I hope you're happy. You've torn this family apart. Aaron is devastated. He was so excited for his birthday, and now everything is ruined, all because of you." I felt my stomach twist as I listened. "I hope David was worth it," she continued. "Because you've embarrassed us. Don't expect us to help you when you come crawling back. You've made your bed. Now lie in it." I deleted the message before it finished. David noticed my reaction immediately. "What did she say?" "More of the same," I muttered. "Guilt trips, manipulation. She's blaming me for everything." David pulled me into a hug. "She doesn't get to do that to you anymore." And he was right. I couldn't let her control me with guilt. Not anymore. When the wedding day finally arrived, I woke up feeling anxious but determined. The ceremony was held at a small venue by the water. The weather was perfect, sunny with a gentle breeze. Everything felt peaceful. As I walked down the aisle, my heart swelled. The people who truly cared about me were there, my friends, David's family, Aunt Lucy, Uncle Tom, but my parents weren't. Neither was Aaron. For a moment, that familiar sadness crept in. The little girl inside me still wanted her mom and dad to be proud of her, but as I looked at David, waiting for me with a smile that lit up his entire face, I realized something important. I didn't need their approval anymore. This was my life, my happiness, and I was finally choosing me. The ceremony was beautiful. Simple, honest. It wasn't the grand event I had once imagined, but it was perfect in a way that really mattered. As I walked down the aisle, all the anxiety melted away. David stood there, waiting for me, his eyes locked on mine. I'll never forget the way he looked at me in that moment, like I was the only person in the world. When we exchanged vows, his voice cracked with emotion, and I had to blink back tears. I promised to love you, support you, and choose you every day for the rest of my life, David said, his hands trembling slightly as he slid the ring onto my finger. In that moment, surrounded by people who actually cared, I realized something huge. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a turning point. I wasn't just marrying David. I was marrying the idea of independence. I was committing to a life where I made the choices, not my parents, not anyone else. The reception was small but lively. We rented out a cozy restaurant by the water. There was laughter, music, and a lot of love in the air. I finally felt like I could breathe. No pretending, no walking on eggshells, just being myself. Aunt Lucy came up to me at one point, pulling me into a tight hug. "You look so happy, Claire," she said, beaming. "I am," I told her, and for the first time in a long time, I actually meant it. Uncle Tom chimed in with a wink. "You know, your mom's probably fuming right now." I chuckled. "Yeah, I'm sure she is." Lucy shook her head. "Let her be mad. You've done more for them than anyone could ask, and they never appreciated it. It's time you lived your life for you." Those words hit me deep. I had spent so much of my life trying to make my parents proud, sacrificing my own happiness in the process. But now, I was done with that. Later that night, after the reception wound down, David and I sat outside, watching the waves. The city lights reflected off the water, and the sound of the ocean was calming. "I'm proud of you," David said softly, his arm wrapped around my shoulders. "For what?" "For standing up for yourself," he replied. "For finally breaking free from them." I leaned my head on his shoulder, letting out a long breath. It feels strange, you know? Like I'm supposed to feel guilty, but I don't. Not anymore. David kissed the top of my head. "You shouldn't. You've spent your whole life putting other people first. It's about time you chose yourself." He was right. For years, I had bent over backward to make my parents happy. I had given them money, time, emotional support, everything I had to give, and in return they had taken me for granted. But not anymore. The next morning, as we packed for our honeymoon, my phone buzzed with a notification, another text from Mom. David glanced at me. "You don't have to read it." "I know," I said, staring at the screen. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the message. It was short, but it stung. "You've embarrassed this family. Don't expect us to be there when you come crawling back. You made your choice." I sighed, deleting the text without replying. David watched me carefully. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, surprising myself. "I actually am." For the first time, her words didn't hurt. They didn't hold the same power over me. Because I wasn't living for her approval anymore, I was done being the family's punching bag. Our honeymoon was exactly what we needed. We spent a week in the mountains, hiking during the day and curling up by the fire at night. It felt like a reset, a chance to start fresh. One evening, as we sat outside watching the stars, David took my hand. "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe we should move, start somewhere new, away from all the drama." I looked at him, my heart swelling with gratitude. He always knew exactly what I needed, even before I did. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "I think that's a great idea." "Dallas?" he suggested with a grin. "Dallas," I agreed. We had talked about moving before, but this time it felt real. It felt right. A new chapter, a new life. Just us. Moving to Dallas was the best decision we ever made. We found a cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood with a view of the city skyline. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was ours. Those first few weeks felt surreal. Waking up without the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me? That was new. For the first time, I wasn't checking my phone every morning, bracing for a guilt-filled message from Mom or a favor they needed me to do. David noticed the change in me right away. "You've been smiling more," he said one evening as we sat on our balcony, watching the sunset. "I guess I'm finally free," I said with a laugh. "Free looks good on you." And it did. But as much as I wanted to leave the past behind, it wasn't that simple. About a month after we moved, I got a call from my cousin Jake. "Hey, Claire," he said cautiously. "I heard about the wedding and everything with your parents." I tensed up. "Yeah, I'm sure Mom's been telling everyone I ruined the family." Jake sighed. "Honestly, most of us know how she is. We've seen how they treat you. It's not a secret." That surprised me. I'd always assumed my family just turned a blind eye to the favoritism, but hearing someone acknowledge it felt validating. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," Jake continued. "You deserved better." "Thanks, Jake," I said, my voice softening. "That means a lot." Before we hung up, he added, "And for what it's worth, a lot of us are proud of you. It takes guts to stand up to them." That call stuck with me. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Even with some family members showing support, Mom didn't let up. Every few weeks, I'd get another text or voicemail from her, always the same tone, angry, manipulative, trying to guilt me back into submission. One message stood out more than the others. "Aaron is struggling, Claire. He's having a hard time since you left. He needs you." I rolled my eyes as I read it. Aaron was always struggling, according to her, and somehow, I was always supposed to fix it. David noticed me staring at my phone and sighed. "What now?" "Apparently, Aaron's life is falling apart without me," I said with a bitter laugh. David shook his head. "They just don't stop, do they?" "Nope. And they never will." He leaned in, taking my hand. "But you're not that person anymore. You don't owe them anything." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words. I wasn't the family's emotional crutch anymore, and I wasn't going back. Our life in Dallas started to feel like home. David and I spent weekends exploring new restaurants, going to art exhibits, and making plans for the future. We talked about starting a family someday, buying a house, building a life that was truly ours. For the first time in my life, I felt light, but every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering, what if they had been different? What if my parents had ever put me first? One evening, as we sat on the balcony with a bottle of wine, I voiced the thought out loud. "Do you think they'll ever change?" David looked thoughtful for a moment before shaking his head. "No, not unless they want to. And right now, they don't see anything wrong with how they've treated you." I sighed. I guess I just wanted to believe that, deep down, they cared. They probably do. In their own twisted way. David said gently, "But that doesn't mean you have to keep letting them hurt you." He was right. Again. A few weeks later, I got a text from Mom. "I miss you, Claire. Please call me." I stared at the screen, my heart tugging in two directions. Part of me wanted to believe she was being sincere, that maybe, after everything, she finally realized how much she had hurt me. But deep down, I knew better. I knew that if I called, it would just be more of the same, guilt, manipulation, and endless demands. I took a deep breath and typed out my response. "I'm happy with the life I've built. I can't go back to what it was. I need to move forward." When I hit send, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I had finally said it. I was done living for their approval. I was living for me. Life moved on, and so did I. David and I settled into our new routine in Dallas. We both found jobs we loved, made new friends, and built a life that felt normal. Peaceful, happy. But every once in a while, the past would creep back in. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It came in the quiet moments, the lull of a long drive, a rainy Sunday afternoon, or when I saw a family laughing together at the park. I'd wonder, what would my life be like if my parents had ever really seen me? If they had loved me the way they loved Aaron? It wasn't bitterness anymore, just a lingering ache. But the difference now? I didn't let it weigh me down. I had chosen my peace, and I wasn't giving it up. One afternoon, David and I were unpacking groceries when my phone buzzed. This time, it wasn't my mom. It was Aaron. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. It had been months since I'd heard from him. He hadn't called or texted after the wedding, or more accurately, after not showing up to the wedding. David noticed me freeze. "Who is it?" "Aaron," I said quietly. David put the milk in the fridge and wiped his hands on a towel. "You gonna answer?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I need to." I stepped out onto the balcony and answered the call. "Claire," Aaron said, his voice softer than I remembered. "Hey." "Hey," I replied, leaning on the railing. "It's been a while." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "Yeah, it has. I've been thinking about you. I heard you moved to Dallas." "I did," I said. "David and I wanted a fresh start." "That's good," Aaron said. "I'm glad you're happy." I wasn't sure what to say. This wasn't the conversation I expected. No guilt trips, no demands, just Aaron. After a beat, he sighed. "Look, I've been meaning to call you for a while. I wanted to say I'm sorry." That caught me off guard. "For what?" "For everything," he said. "For how Mom and Dad treated you. For not standing up for you when I should have. I guess I just got used to being the favorite. It never really hit me how unfair it was until you walked away." I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. "Aaron?" "No, let me finish," he said quickly. "I don't want to make excuses. I just want you to know that I see it now, and I'm sorry. You deserved better." I stood there, stunned. The words I had needed to hear my whole life were finally being spoken. "I appreciate that," I said softly. "It means a lot." We talked for a while after that, about life, about growing up, about how things had spiraled so far out of control. For the first time in years, it felt like I was really talking to my brother. Not the spoiled, entitled version of him I had grown up resenting, but the person underneath it all. When I hung up, I walked back inside, feeling lighter. David was waiting for me, his eyes full of questions. "How did it go?" "Good," I said, smiling. "Really good." He pulled me into a hug. "I'm glad." As I rested my head on his shoulder, I realized something important. Forgiveness didn't mean going back to the way things were. It didn't mean forgetting the hurt or letting people walk all over me again. It meant letting go of the anger, freeing myself from the weight of it. Months passed, and life continued to blossom in ways I never thought possible. David and I bought a small house with a big backyard. We adopted a rescue dog named Bella, who immediately became our world. We talked more seriously about starting a family, and for the first time, the idea didn't terrify me. I wanted to build something new, something better. One afternoon, while David was mowing the lawn and Bella was chasing butterflies in the yard, I sat on the porch, sipping lemonade. My phone buzzed with another text from Mom. "We miss you. Please come home." I stared at it for a long time before setting the phone down without replying. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt. I felt at peace, because I knew I was home. Looking back, I don't regret any of it. Leaving my parents behind was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most necessary. I learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about love, respect, and mutual support. I found that with David. I found it with my friends, with the little family we were building together. and I found it in myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living for someone else. I was living for me, and that was everything. Story 2. My husband looked me in the eye and stated, "I don't have room for sick people in my life," when I begged him for money to save the life of our 3-year-old daughter. Then he brought in his new mistress and tossed us out into the streets. He slammed the door in our faces while I stood there sobbing and holding my kid. What? He was unaware that I felt something was triggered by his treachery, a vengeance scheme, and when he awoke the following morning, his idyllic life had already begun to fall apart. Dorothy is my name. And I would have told you that I was living the dream if you had asked me a year ago. Adam, whom I believed to be my soulmate, and I were married at the age of 29. Additionally, we resided in a stunning house in Houston, Texas. Sophia, our 3-year-old daughter, was the joy of my existence. Everything appeared to be ideal, or at least that's what I told myself. Adam was a busy businessman who never stopped producing. His age was 33, charming and driven. As a stay-at-home mom, I took pride in the family we were creating. It seemed like the final piece of our puzzle when Sophia entered our lives. I played with her, planned her meals, and daydreamed about the life she would lead. Adam put in a lot of work, but I reminded myself that it was all for us. I never questioned his impromptu business travels or late nights. I had faith in our future together and trusted him. At 3, Sophia was everything to me. She was bursting with joy and interest. Her tiny hands were continually reaching for mine, and her laughs filled the home like music. I smiled every day because of her. Adam also loved her, or so I believed. As he called her princess, he would raise her into the air. I held on to those times because they seemed genuine, oblivious to the tempest that is simmering under the surface. Adam informed me of his upcoming major business trip one evening following Sophia's 3rd birthday. He gave me a forehead kiss and informed me that he would be gone for a few days. It was not out of the ordinary. He was frequently out of town for work. It didn't bother me. I had total faith in him, and I thought our family was safe because of his employment. A few days later, everything started to go south. Sophia first became ill with a cold. I didn't give it much thought at first. Children become ill, don't they? On the 2nd day, however, she was burning and could not keep her eyes open due to the rapid rise in her temperature. I tried over-the-counter medications and ice compresses, but nothing helped. Her gentle whimpers shattered my heart, and her tiny body seemed so frail in my arms. I was afraid. In the hopes that Adam would come home quickly to assist, I contacted him right away. I was so terrified that I could hardly talk when he picked up. "Sophia is really ill, Adam. I am unsure of how to treat her high temperature. I am still haunted by his reaction. Dorothy, I'm going to take off. You will have to deal with it. She's probably all right. Simply administer some medication to her." "Adam," I begged, "it's serious. She needs medical attention." "Dorothy." His voice was colder than I had ever heard him say it. "A little fever won't cause me to postpone a work trip. Her mother is you. Take care of it." I was left speechless and holding a youngster in dire need of assistance when he hung up. I was immobile for a minute. How could the man I trusted and loved be so contemptuous? Sophia, however, was too busy to wait for me to recover from my astonishment. I had to do something for her. I prayed the whole time as I hurried her to the hospital. Despite the pandemonium at the emergency department, I pleaded with the receptionist for assistance. Upon eventually examining her, neurologist Dr. Wilson's expression darkened. He clarified that her brain had developed difficulties as a result of the fever. He stated she needed surgery right away. She can only be saved in this way. Surgery broke my heart. "Sophia, my dear little one, what will the price be?" With a shaky voice, I asked. Dr. Wilson paused. "For us to move forward, a $15,000 deposit is required." $15,000? Adam wasn't returning my calls, and I didn't have that much money. I sent him voice messages, voicemails, and texts. He caught sight of them. I am aware of this as he did not respond to the red-marked mails. When we were at our lowest, my husband, the man who professed to love our family, was neglecting us. I cried as I had never cried before, as I sat in that chilly hospital hallway, holding Sophia's lifeless hand. I had no idea what to do. Then it dawned on me. There was nothing I could do. After running home and grabbing my jewelry box, I went back to the hospital. Everything I had was sold. Everything from family heirlooms to my wedding ring. I pleaded with the jeweler to give me the remaining amount, but it was still insufficient. Somehow, he consented. As soon as I gave the deposit, Dr. Wilson and his staff got to work. As I prayed for Sophia's life in the waiting room, ours seemed to drag on for years. Dr. Wilson gave me a little comforting smile when he eventually emerged. The procedure went well. She will be all right. I was so relieved that I knelt down and thanked him and the team for saving my daughter. All that mattered was that Sophia was still alive. But even in that thankful moment, don't ask me questions. Adam was where? Why hasn't he taken the time to reply? I didn't realize it at the time, but it was the beginning of the end when my heart started to break. My idyllic existence was falling apart, individually. When we got home, I didn't know what was in store for me. I was exhausted both physically and emotionally when Sophia and I eventually made it home from the hospital. After the terror of the last several days, all I wanted to do was put her to bed and let her relax. However, I noticed something odd as soon as I came into the driveway. In the driveway was Adam's vehicle. My heart briefly felt better. Perhaps he came to apologize and explain. Perhaps his quiet during Sophia's difficulty was misinterpreted by me. I went to the door with Sophia in my arms. I could hear muffled conversations and see that the lights were on inside. I was unable to identify the cause of the strange feeling. What I saw when I opened the door stopped me cold. Adam and a young woman I had never seen before were standing in the living room. Her tall stature, flawless hair, and arrogant smirk made my stomach flip. They were too near to be innocent, but they were laughing. Sophia sensed my strain and moaned in my arms. "Adam," I said, my voice wavering. "Who is this?" He faced me. His face seemed composed, almost unconcerned. "It's Chloe." As though introducing an old friend, he said, "Now we're together." Just for a second, I believed I had misheard him. What was he discussing? "Adam," I said, raising my voice, "what are you saying?" "I recently returned with our kid from the hospital. Are you even interested in what she has endured? What have I experienced?" My heart was stabbed by his response. "Doherty," he remarked icily, "I've already decided. From now on, you and Sophia can handle things independently. I don't need to be pulled down by ill individuals." I gaped at him in shock. Did I truly have a life with this man? My child's father. As his comments sank in, the room appeared to whirl. "Are you abandoning us?" I mumbled for her. Chloe took a step forward. Her smile grew. "It isn't intimate." Her tone was sickly sweet. "You don't grasp what Adam and I have." I was at my breaking point. "You dare?" I yelled. At last, my amazement gave way to rage. "While you've been playing with your little girlfriend, I've been keeping this family together. What I had to do to preserve our daughter's life? Do you even know? I sold everything. My mother's necklace and my wedding ring, all because you were too indifferent to pick up your phone." Adam's expressionless face shrugged. "It's not my problem, Dorothy. It's yours." He went to the door and opened it before I could say anything more. "You must go," he stated sternly. "I've packed your belongings already. They're outside." What I was hearing was unbelievable. "Are you throwing us out?" My voice broke as I asked. "Adam, where are we going to go? Sophia lives here. It's my home." "Finality," he said. "It will come to you." Smirking, Chloe leaned against the doorframe. "Good luck, Dorothy," she remarked mockingly. I had the strength to hold my head up because I could feel Sophia's weight in my arms and her tiny body warming up against mine. "Adam, you'll regret this." Despite the tears running down my cheeks, I spoke steadily. "I'll make sure everyone knows you're a liar and a coward." He did not recoil. He dismissed me and closed the door behind me, saying, "Do what you need to do." I felt angry and hopeless at the same time as I stood outdoors in the chilly night. I gazed at Sophia's naive face, completely oblivious to the treachery we had just witnessed. I whispered that everything would be well. Not for her, but for me. "We'll overcome this, I swear, with no other option." I referred to Grace as my closest friend. On the first ring, she answered, her voice worried. "Dorothy, what's the matter?" I rushed through telling her everything: the medical facility, the operation, Adam's treachery, and the way he threw us out. Grace didn't think twice. "Come to me," she firmly commanded. "You and I will meet at the shelter. This is not unique to you." Grace embraced me tightly when I got to the women's shelter where she works. "Now you're safe," she whispered quietly. "Together, we will solve this." I opened up to Grace throughout the course of the following several days. I informed her about Adam's treachery, his sudden coldness, and his decision to choose Chloe above his own family. She listened without passing judgment. She had a sorrowful and angry expression on her face. One night she said, "Dorothy, there's more to this in my opinion. Adam never abandons his family without a good cause. The numbers don't add up." "What are you saying?" I inquired, but I had a sneaking suspicion she was correct. Grace bent over. She had a solemn look. "Adam could be concealing something, and I know someone who can help us uncover it. I met Ethan that way, a private detective." Grace had faith. His keen eyes seemed to look right through me, and he was in his early 40s. He said, "I'll delve into Adam's life. I'll find out whether there's anything to unearth." Although I had no idea what to anticipate, I was certain of one thing: I required clarification. I couldn't allow Adam to get away with ruining my life. I concentrated on Sophia, who was gradually getting better, while I awaited Ethan's results. She was laughing less now. She was still alive, but her vigor had reduced. That was the only thing that mattered. I was still unable to get rid of the rage that was burning in my chest. I wouldn't allow Adam to leave us unharmed after he had deceived and abandoned us. Whatever secrets he had to conceal, I was going to find them. The truth would alter everything, even though I was unaware of it at the time. I waited nervously in Grace's little office at the shelter for Ethan to bring his results a week after we first met. I had so many questions running through my head. What may Adam be concealing? Was this treachery only the beginning? In the corner, Sophia was playing peacefully, her gentle chuckles providing a little solace amidst the chaos. Ethan's expression was glum when he eventually entered. He had a folder under his arm, and I could tell he had discovered something important by the weight in his gaze. "Dorothy." He put the folder on the desk and started. "You must prepare yourselves. There is more to what I have discovered than cheating. It's far worse." I felt sick to my stomach. Grace grabbed my hand and squeezed it. Her nonverbal cue that I wasn't alone. "Tell me." Despite the fury building within of me, I spoke steadily. When Ethan accessed the folder, pictures, papers, and transaction logs were visible. "It's more than simply an affair between Adam and Chloe," he clarified. "They are partners in business. Illegal partners. They have been engaging in money laundering, fraudulent scams, and even the transfer of monies into offshore accounts." I gaped at him in shock. "Are Adam's criminals, you say?" Ethan gave a nod. "And for years, he has been doing this. He has probably been operating his lawful business as a front. He has more than one mistress in Chloe. He has her as an accomplice. They have woven a web of deception and unlawful activity together." It seemed as though the room was spinning. I had put my life in the hands of this man, my child's father. Although I had suspected treachery, I never thought this degree of dishonesty would be there. "How are you aware of all this?" I asked, finding it difficult to take in the facts. Ethan pointed at the papers. "I tracked down his money dealings, investigated public documents, and spoke with several of his former workers. Everything in this case suggests that they were involved in illegal activity. Even federal officials have been unaware of them. However, they have so far escaped notice," Grace said firmly as she leaned forward. "This is a game changer, Dorothy. Adam is more than a liar. He is a criminal. You and Sophia must be protected. We must bring this to the attention of the authorities." I gave a nod. I felt my rage rising to the surface. I discovered that Adam had been leading a double life as a scammer after he had wrecked our family and left his child behind. "How do we proceed?" "Determined to fight back," I asked. Ethan glanced at Grace and then said something. "We begin by constructing a case. Although the information I have acquired is strong, More will be required to guarantee that he and Chloe are held accountable. A lawyer will be necessary, a decent one. Grace didn't think twice. Someone I know can assist. Give me a call. I met Megan that way, an astute and resolute attorney who focused on situations similar to mine. She was in her early 40s and had a serene assurance that instantly made me feel comfortable. "Dee Dee," she remarked when we first met, "we're going to use the evidence that Ethan has gathered to turn this around, even if you've gone through hell. In addition to exposing Adam's wrongdoing, we can make sure you and Sophia receive the justice you are due." Megan and Ethan put in a lot of effort over the course of the following several days to make the case stronger. Ethan worked with local police to expose Adam's illicit activities, while Megan applied for an emergency order to safeguard Sophia and me. The support I got from Grace, Megan, and Ethan was overwhelming, for the first time since we were expelled by Adam. I had a flash of hope. The pivotal moment occurred when Ethan, with the assistance of law enforcement, planned a raid on one of Adam's commercial sites. They completed a fake transaction by apprehending Adam and Chloe. The word circulated rapidly after the arrest. It was unreal to watch the video of Adam being escorted away in handcuffs. Once the center of my universe, this man suddenly appeared to be an unfamiliar face. I had a weird mixture of comfort and grief when Megan called to inform me that the allegations against Adam and Chloe were true. They were relieved that justice was soon to catch up with them. But sorrow for Sophia's and my lost lives. Nevertheless, I was aware that until this chapter was ended, we couldn't proceed. Megan told me we had a good case, and the court date was arranged. "You'll have to testify, Dorothy," she replied. "Your story must be told to the court. What you've given up, what you've been betrayed. Are you prepared for that?" I paused. The idea of appearing before strangers and a judge. Intimidating. Then I turned to see Sophia playing contentedly in the room's corner. Her laughing served as a reminder of my cause. "Yes," I answered in a firm voice. "I'm prepared." I prepared myself for the fight as the trial drew near. With Megan, Grace, and Ethan at my side, I wasn't going to let Adam triumph as he attempted to break me and ruin our family. I felt confident in my ability to confront him and see to it that justice was done. I had no idea how much my remaining fortitude would be put to the test throughout this battle. The trial day finally came. Holding Sophia's hand, I stood outside the courthouse. Her big, trusting eyes reminded me of the reason I had to face this day. It was for our future. For her. Megan and Grace were standing next to me, their steadfast support. We were joined a few moments later by Ethan. His serene assurance was comforting. He said, "Dorothy, we've got this. The proof is strong." We walked into the courtroom. My heart pounded. The size of the chamber, with its rows of chairs and tall judge's bench, was daunting. Adam and Chloe were seated across the room, with their attorneys at their sides. Adam grinned as if it were all a game when he saw me. I stifled my rage and turned my attention to Sophia, who was sitting in the gallery safely with Grace. Opening comments were made before the trial started. Megan described the case, Adam's treachery, his unlawful actions, and his family's desertion in a firm and authoritative manner. As I listened to her, I was filled with pride. I was no longer fighting this battle alone. To expose the truth, everyone worked together. My legs felt wobbly when it was my turn to testify. I recited everything as I walked up to the stand, vowing to speak the truth. Adam's lack of concern, Sophia's sickness, and the heartache of having to sell my jewels to help her. As I spoke about coming home to discover him with Chloe and his heartless choice to expel us, my voice faltered. There was silence in the courtroom, as everyone watching me took courage from Sophia's grin in the gallery. I was completely honest in my responses to Megan's queries. Adam's defense team attempted to paint him as a misguided businessman, asserting that his connection with Chloe was a personal affair and that I had overreacted. However, Megan persisted. She presented indisputable proof of his fraudulent plans, dismantling his claims piece by piece. Ethan's painstaking attention to detail had left no gaps. Megan once questioned Mr. Johnson. "Why did you disregard your wife's cries for assistance when your daughter was in critical condition?" Adam writhed. His appeal is waning. He mumbled, "I was busy." maybe busy with Chloe. During Sophia's operation, Megan persisted while displaying proof of his lavish resort vacations. Adam's cheeks became hot as the muttering in the courtroom increased in volume. Their destiny was sealed by Chloe's testimony. She further implicated Adam by confessing to her role in the fraudulent actions under duress. Their web of falsehoods had come undone at the end. Strict and methodical, Judge Walker carefully considered the evidence. Her decision was uncompromising. Adam Johnson and Chloe Reed are found guilty on many charges of money laundering and fraud by this court. She turned to me and said, "Their actions were not only illegal, but reprehensible, showing blatant disregard for family and the law." Her voice became quieter. "Mrs. Johnson, it is admirable that you have the guts to come forward. This court gives you complete custody of Sophia and all of Mr. Johnson's assets, including those unrelated to his criminal activity." My cheeks started to well up with tears. Adam and Chloe were sentenced to lengthy jail terms. Outside, the weight of treachery started to lessen when justice was done. Grace gave me a firm hug. "Dorothy, you succeeded. You defended yourself and Sophia." "Ethan." Satisfaction eased his solemn demeanor. He added, "This triumph is yours." I felt at ease as we drove back to the refuge. Even in her nightmares, Sophia slept in her car seat with her little hand gripping mine. Grace gave me a grin. "What will you do next?" "A new beginning," I said resolutely. "A place where Sophia and I may live in safety and happiness." Little triumphs in the next weeks gave fresh optimism. Grace assisted me in locating a little apartment in a peaceful area. Megan helped me manage the assets and made sure I had money. In order to give back to the shelter that had saved us, I started volunteering there. I was putting Sophia to bed one evening. "Are we happy now, Mommy?" she inquired quietly. "Yes, darling," I said, stroking her hair. "We're content and secure. This is only the start of an amazing life." Sitting in our tiny living room that evening, I thought back on our trip, the struggle for justice, the heartache, and the treachery. All of it had culminated at this moment. I had changed as a person. I had never been stronger, smarter, or more determined. I was excited to give Sophia the life she was due. I felt so free for the first time in a long time. Story 3. My cruel mother-in-law insisted that I give my husband ownership of my $150 million business. I declined, seeing through their avarice. At that point, they bought off my own workers to destroy my business, leaving me with nothing. However, they were unaware of my plans. Their world went into overdrive when they woke up the very following morning to a startling turn they had not anticipated. I never imagined that I would be sitting here telling the tale of how my world almost fell apart. Maya Rivers is my name. I'm a 33-year-old fashion designer who thought I had the ideal life until a few years ago. I dedicated all of my imagination and energy to ensuring the success of the $150 million sustainable apparel enterprise that I inherited from my father. The fast-paced excitement of New York City, my job, and the conviction that I was creating something significant, something my father would be proud of, were all things I liked. Daniel Hawthorne, however, followed. I was blown away when I first met him. Daniel embodied all the qualities society advised me to seek: attractive, charming, and the heir of a family fortune. I always felt a little out of place at fancy gatherings like the charity dinner where we met. Even though I was successful, Daniel had a knack of giving you the impression that you were the only person there. I laughed when he said all the appropriate things, and I ended up accepting his proposal within a few months. In retrospect, I should have spotted the little fishers sooner. However, love has a way of making you blind. Judith Hawthorne, his mother, was a quite different matter. As soon as we first met, she expressed her disapproval of me clearly. I wasn't what Mom had in mind for her beloved son. I was an outsider with a professional obsession who was attempting to damage the Hawthorne family's perfect reputation. It didn't matter, I told myself. After all, I wasn't going to marry her. However, Judith was relentless, intrusive, and cruel in ways that caused me to question my own character. Things first altered in a subtle way after the wedding. Daniel began remarking on my excessive employment and the proper position of a woman in the house. I dismissed them as unimportant viewpoints, but they became increasingly incisive and acute. Judith would interject and advise me to give Daniel command of my father's business. He has greater financial experience, sweetheart. She would grin condescendingly. The thought of abandoning my life's job seemed unimaginable, but I steered clear of conflict because I didn't want to upset my marriage. I regret not speaking out sooner since things quickly got out of hand. Judith spilled the beans at a particularly heated meal one evening. Maya. Time for a decision, she remarked. You are now a member of the Hawthorne family. That entails letting go of immature aspirations to manage a company. Everything can be handled by Daniel. I went cold. Childhood fantasies, I said again. This business is a heritage of my father. It's what I left behind. Her face grew stern. This family, not some vanity project, is your responsibility. Daniel stared at his plate and said nothing. And something broke inside of me at that very instant. I firmly said, I won't do that. I'm not going to give up my business or my identity. Judith and Daniel exchanged glances as Judith's eyes furrowed. She said icily, We'll see about that. I initially believed it to be a baseless threat, but things only got worse from there. Daniel pulled away. At the slightest things, he loses his fury. He was critical of everything I did, from the way I spent my time to the way I led my team. Judith began to appear out of the blue, circling me like a vulture. Both of them were trying to wear me down, but I resisted. When I received a call at 2 a.m. one night, that was the tipping point. My helper was in a panic. Maya, the factory, it's burning. Daniel asked me idly where I was going as I hurried out of bed, my heart racing. The factory is burning, I responded, reaching for my coat immediately. His answer made me shiver. Oh, very unfortunate. There was anarchy in the plant. The fire raged. Firefighters battled to contain the fire as smoke filled the air. By the time the fire was put out, half of the property had been destroyed. As I stood there, I saw all that my father and I had created turn to ash. I was numb. However, something wasn't quite right in the back of mind. Mishaps occur, yes. However, this seems intentional. The reports came in the next morning. They stated it was a sad coincidence caused by defective wiring. However, I couldn't get rid of the impression that it was more. Daniel and Judith hardly appeared worried as I picked my way through the debris. Judith even recommended that I sell what was left. Cut your losses, she remarked nonchalantly. Perhaps it's an indication that you should concentrate on more significant matters. It hurt what she said. I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right, but I wasn't sure where to begin. At that point, I made the decision to work with Liam Carter, a private investigator. I was determined to keep going until I had the answers I needed. I had no idea that what Liam would discover would destroy any remaining trust, but as I stood there among the rubble, I sensed that one thing was decided. They want to destroy me and seize all I owned. However, they underestimated me, and their greatest error was that. The days following the fire were hazy. I didn't get much sleep. I mentally reenacted every moment. I couldn't stop thinking about the specifics, the timing, and most importantly, Judith's eerily composed response. There was something calculating about her manner, not just chilly. Daniel, however, pretended that the fire was a minor annoyance rather than a disaster. He didn't even pretend to declare or try to console me. More than anything else, his indifference ached. I put myself into repairing what I could, protecting what I had left, and comforting my staff. However, I had a gut feeling that there was more to this fire than first seemed while I was working. At that point, I contacted private investigator Liam Carter. A buddy had suggested me. Sharp-eyed and quietly confident, Liam was in his early 40s. I told him about the fire, my concerns, and the increasing hostility between Daniel and Judith, and he listened intently. He said, "You think this wasn't an accident?" Not so much a question as a statement. I said firmly, "I know it wasn't. All I need is evidence." Liam gave a nod. "Okay, let me begin with the fundamentals. CCTV video, staff interviews, and a more thorough examination of your company's finances. I'll find it if there's anything to unearth." I occupied myself for the following few weeks. However, it was excruciating to wait for Liam's results. Daniel became increasingly aloof and began spending nights away from home without giving a reason. He waved his hand dismissively when I challenged him. His voice was brimming with frustration as he continued, "I have business to handle. Perhaps I should concentrate on determining how to handle your predicament. My circumstances?" He referred to it as the fire. My life's labor has been all but wrecked by that. The fact that Daniel was no longer the man I believed I had married was becoming more and more obvious every day. Or perhaps he had never been. I began to observe his actions more closely. He had quieter chats with Judith, took more calls in private, and both of them would get silent if I walked in the door. It was no longer paranoid. There was something happening. 2 weeks later, Liam gave me his first update, and I was in complete shock at what he revealed. "I've seen the CCTV footage from the fire's night." He started moving a laptop in my direction across the table. "Take a look." Hours before the fire began, 2 of my employees were seen entering the workplace on the blurry footage. I knew who they were right away. Longtime employees Mark and Elena were both people I had complete faith in. In the video, they could be seen tinkering with equipment and spraying what seemed to be liquid from a canister on the ground. Arson. Liam attested that defective wiring was not the cause of the incident. Maya. It was intentional. I was feeling nauseous. However, why? Why would they act in this way? Liam's face grew serious. Things start to become interesting at that point. I had separate conversations with Mark and Elena. They initially disputed everything. However, they broke down when I showed them the video. They acknowledged receiving payment to ignite the fire. Who paid for it? Even though I knew the answer, I still asked. As though he was considering how much to say, he paused before responding. Daniel and Judith. I was struck in the chest by the words. Are you certain? They were cautious, but not sufficiently so. Large, inexplicable transfers from an account connected to Daniel are shown in bank records. Only a few days prior to the fire, Mark and Elena got the payments. I tried to comprehend the treachery as I sat there in startled silence. My husband and his mother, Daniel and Judith, had plotted to ruin my company. I could feel the searing, blinding rage swelling within me. Everything I had worked for and everything I loved had been destroyed by fire. For what purpose? Strength? Command. How they could be so heartless was beyond me. Now what should I do? With a trembling voice, I asked Liam. We make a case, he replied plainly. There's enough for you to go to the police. But we'll need more if you want this to stick. Anything that directly links them to the arson, including phone logs and emails. Liam kept digging over the ensuing weeks, and the evidence he found was incriminating. There were phone logs of late-night calls to Mark and Elena, emails between Judith and Daniel outlining their strategy in coded language, and even a paper trail of incentives given to other staff members to keep them silent about their knowledge. I didn't confront Judith or Daniel in spite of the growing facts. Not quite yet. Rather, I pretended to be the unaware wife who was wasting my time as Liam and my lawyer, Sandra Torres, constructed a case. Sandra was a fiercely independent lady who was well known for her high-profile cases and competence. She didn't hold back when I presented her with the proof. It's airtight. I said? She said. They will not escape punishment. The hardest part, though, was pretending everything was normal. I wanted to scream every time I sat across from Daniel at dinner, or had to put up with one of Judith's arrogant comments. I wanted to let them know that I was aware of the failure of their scheme, that I would see their prosecution. I couldn't risk giving them away, though. Not quite yet. Rather, I concentrated on reconstructing what I could. During those gloomy days, I could still hear my father's voice, even though the weight of their treachery felt like it would crush me. Maya, never allow someone to take away your strength or integrity, no matter what. Those remarks were like a lifeline to me. They didn't know me, yet they had attempted to ruin me. Judith wanted me to be a submissive, weak woman, but I wasn't. I also had no intention of letting them win. Everything was coming together. They will soon come to see how terribly they had misjudged me. It was an effort in self-control to sit across from Daniel every night and act as though nothing had changed. It required all of my strength to continue playing the part of the naive wife, because I could feel the weight of the falsehoods between us. However, I felt in my heart that I had changed. The woman who had previously trusted him, who had trusted his easy grin and charm, was no longer me. I was now battling time, building up my strength, and becoming ready. I defeat him and Judith. Liam discovered devastating evidence, incriminating bank records, discussions between Judith and Daniel about how to deal with the Maya issue, and even witness statements from staff members who had been bought off to be silent were all there. I wasn't ready yet, but my lawyer Sandra reassured me that we had enough to take them to court. Not until everything was in its proper place. I wanted to be certain that they couldn't possibly get out of this. Then, one night, something occurred that almost caused me to lose my cool. Judith was sitting in my living room drinking tea as if she owned the house when I got home. Even if Daniel isn't there, her presence was enough to make me uneasy. With a smile that stopped short of her eyes, she said, "Maya." I felt that we should have a brief conversation, from one woman to another. For what reason did I force myself to remain composed? She put down her teacup with a purposeful clink and said, "Oh, you know. Decisions in life, the future." She bent over. She lowered her voice to a whisper of conspiracy. "You've experienced a lot lately. The fire, the strain of reconstruction. All of this is very regrettable." I clenched my fists at my sides. However, I spoke evenly. "Yes, it is. But I'll get by." "You will, of course." "Smoothly," she said. "You've always had such a strong will, but sometimes determination isn't enough. Sometimes you have to know when to let go. Don't you believe it's time to consider selling what's left of your company? It's a burden. Maya and Daniel can help you start anew." I gazed at her, the mask finally loosening. Her words were loaded with veiled threats, but I could see the avarice in her eyes. She wasn't even pretending to disguise it anymore. They wanted me to give up everything, my firm, my heritage, my identity, so they could claim it for themselves. "Thank you for your care, Judith," I responded, my voice frigid. "But I'm not giving up. Not now, not ever." Her grin faltered for a second, and I caught a flash of something, anger, maybe even dread. "Well," she said, rising and straightening her skirt, "I hope you realize what you're doing for your sake." She didn't say anything more before leaving, and I got a boost of resolve when the door shut behind her. They were becoming desperate. They were aware that I would not back down, and they understood that their next move would come soon. I wasn't scared, though. No more. Liam presented me with the last puzzle piece a week later, an audio recording of Judith and Daniel talking in depth about the fire. They threatened to buy off the workers, stage the incident to appear to be an accident, and even pressure me into later selling the business. Everything was there, as clear as day. "It's finished." With the file in hand, Liam remarked, "The final nail in the coffin is this." With my heart racing, I nodded. The time has come. Sandra filed the case right away. The accusations were grave. Arson plots, deception. The story was quickly picked up by the media, and within days it was the talk of the town. Every news channel featured pictures of Judith and Daniel, and headlines blared about the fashion empire controversy. Naturally, they disputed all of it, but the proof was overwhelming. Daniel eventually came up to me when the summons came. He barged in, his face flushed with rage, as I was in the kitchen reviewing some papers. "Maya, what the devil is this?" He waved the papers at me and demanded, "Are you suing me? Your own spouse?" I refused to back down and met his look with unflinching determination. "Daniel, you're not my spouse. No more. For financial gain, a spouse does not ruin his wife's life. A spouse does not plot with his mother to destroy all of her hard-earned money." Anger distorted his face. "You have no idea what you're discussing." "Yes, I am well aware of what I am discussing." "I have the proof, Daniel," I stated in my voice. "The phone conversations, emails, and money transfers. I am fully informed." He was momentarily taken aback, as though he hadn't anticipated my reaction. Then his face became stern. "Maya, you're doing something wrong. This is something you will regret." "No," I answered in a firm voice. "I merely made the error of putting my confidence in you." I felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety as he rushed away, slamming the door behind him. I was no longer terrified, but the battle was far from done. I felt like I had control for the first time in months. The media frenzy grew more intense as the court date drew near. Every aspect of the case was discussed on talk programs and social media, and journalists set up camp outside my home. Despite my fatigue, I maintained my attention. I had a group of outstanding attorneys, unwavering proof, and an unquenchable inner fire. I sat by myself in my office the night before the trial, staring at a picture of my father. I said, "I'll put this right, Dad. I'll defend what you created." With my head held high and prepared to take on whatever was ahead, I entered the courtroom the following morning. That day, the courtroom was crowded. I recall feeling like I had 100 eyes on me when I walked in. Everyone was curious to see how the trial would play out, and the media had called it the Hawthorne betrayal. However, I wasn't there for the show or the cameras. I came here to take back my life, my honor, and my father's heritage. With perfectly neutral looks, Daniel and Judith sat at the defense table. However, I could see by their body language that they were tense. They were out of control for once. Every now and again, Judith murmured to Daniel, her angular features showing hints of concern. Daniel didn't even glance in my direction. It made no difference. I was no longer intimidated by them. My attorney, Sandra Torres, was a formidable opponent. She made a strong, unambiguous declaration to start the case. This tale is one of treachery, avarice, and the willful ruin of a woman's life's labor. There is certainly proof that Judith and Daniel Hawthorne plotted to demolish Maya Rivers' company in order to benefit themselves. The evidence was carefully presented by the prosecution. Bank data demonstrating the bribes received from Daniel's account and CCTV video of my personnel starting the fire. Judith and Daniel exchanged emails about the arson and the incriminating audio tape in which they described their strategy and their own voices. For the jurors, the puzzle piece by piece fitted together, and the image it created was indisputable. When Mark and Elena, the workers who started the fire, entered the stand to testify, I sat quietly and listened to what they had to say, reliving every agonizing moment. Controlling my emotions was challenging. They acknowledged their involvement and described how Judith and Daniel had paid and coerced them into doing the crime. They were obviously guilty, and although I was somewhat angry with them, I also felt sorry for them. In a far bigger game, they have been pawns. Naturally, the defense attempted to undermine me. They portrayed me as a chilly, career-focused lady who had irritated her husband's relatives and ignored him. Judith's attorney even implied that I was making up the charges to get even. However, Sandra skillfully and gracefully destroyed their arguments. All of the evidence was sealed. All of the witnesses are reliable. They appeared more desperate the more they attempted to assign blame. I was both scared and determined when it was my turn to testify. I inhaled deeply before addressing the jury. My father's blood, sweat, and tears went into building this business. I started, threatening to choke myself when he was gone, my voice firm in spite of the anguish. In order to respect his efforts and vision, I promised to continue his legacy. Daniel and his family had my trust. I thought they had my best interests and our best interests in mind. However, they didn't. They perceived my achievement as a danger, something to manage and destroy if needed. I turned to face Daniel and Judith, who at last stare into my eyes. They underestimated me, even though they believed they could break me. As I concluded my evidence, the court became quiet. I had an odd kind of catharsis, as though a burden I had been bearing for months had finally been removed. I knew that I had done all in my power to stand up for what was right, no matter what. Hours passed during the jury's deliberations, but it seemed like days when they eventually returned. The suspense in the courtroom was palpable. As the foreman rose to give the verdict on the accusations of fraud, conspiracy, and arson, my pulse was pounding. The defendants are found guilty. I could hardly hear the gasps and whispers that filled the room. I felt a rush of relief sweep over me, and I let myself breathe for the first time in months. Daniel and Judith sat still. They have pale faces. They received severe jail sentences from the judge, and it seemed like justice, even though I knew it wouldn't repair the harm they had done. Although their penalties were less harsh, the workers who participated in the arson are also subject to legal repercussions. Although the court admitted that they had been duped, they nevertheless had to answer for their acts. In my case, the court granted me whole ownership of the Hawthorne family's assets as compensation for the psychological and material harm they had inflicted. In addition to being a practical win, it was also a symbolic one, a method to guarantee that I would no longer be overshadowed by the Hawthornes' ill-gotten authority. Rebuilding my business wasn't simple. The emotional wounds were severe, and the financial loss was enormous. But I put my everything into repairing what had been lost, with the help of my surviving staff, devoted customers, and newfound allies. And eventually, we not only bounced back, but flourished. I was supposed to be destroyed by the fire, but instead, it created something stronger. In the years that followed, my tale served as a glimmer of hope for many who were betrayed and going through difficult times. I received letters from people telling me how my advocacy for justice motivated them to defend their own rights. I was humbled and reminded of the reason I had put up such a strong fight in the first place. In retrospect, I see that the fire marked the start of a new chapter rather than the conclusion of an existing one. Judith and Daniel attempted to deprive me of everything, but they were unable to take away my integrity, tenacity, or resolve, and those were the most important things in the end. Maya, true strength is not about avoiding the flames, my father used to remark. The idea is to rise above the ashes. Now more than ever, I realize that. My narrative is this. It goes beyond retaliation or treachery. It's about having the guts to start over, stand up for what's right, and never allow someone to take away your authority. It's about perseverance, and I hope it serves as a reminder that there is always a way to get back up after a setback.